Hi, everyone. Welcome to the PPUK Podcast. And with us this week, as usual, we have Lee.
Hi.
Paddy.
Hello.
Leah.
Hi.
And, of course, Andy.
Hello.
Yeah, and this week we will be doing artificial age. Anybody got any memories of kind of anticipating this one?
I've got one. I kind of remember on social media that the track list got leaked and it was on social media. People thought that the first track was a spelling mistake because obviously the album's called Artificial Age, and people thought the first track was Artificial Age and someone added a C, but it actually turned out to be the correct track listed. I remember that. And I remember there was this whole campaign of people getting a picture and holding a picture up of holding the album up and then taking a picture and a selfie, and everyone was sharing that. But that's what I can remember of this.
Leah?
For me, I don't have any memories of anticipating this album at all, which is really strange. I've got a blank, but I remember ordering it, and you ordered directly from the estate initially rather than going to HMV or places like that. And I remember being particularly excited because I was like, oh, this has actually come from Paisley Park. In my head it had. And just being amazingly excited. It's absolutely no secret that I'm a huge Andy Allo fan. So for me, this was such an unbelievable treat. And I remember just playing it over and over and over again until it literally came out of my pores. No spoilers, but this is in my top favorite Prince albums of all time. It's in my
no
top
spoilers, 5. But here's a massive spoiler. Thanks.
That's why you could mute me. You had your opportunity.
Yeah, never meet you.
Production and mute that.
Actually, I have now just remembered, of course, this was a double release, right? So that was a weird thing in itself. Not weird if you're a Prince fan because you're used to this sort of nonsense, but but like we'll get onto a little bit of how it fits against Plectrum Electrum maybe near the end or something.
We will.
And Andy wasn't going to have much to say about that. Just nicked the thing I was going to say, which was it was potentially quite exciting because we were essentially getting two albums here.
Yeah.
I remember really like spending a long time before this, really anticipating the Third Eye Girl album because like it had been hinted for so long. It was meant to come out on Cobalt Blue label, but then it got knocked back for a Courtney Love release, and then all of a sudden Warner Brothers was in the picture, and Warner Brothers was back, you know, and I was still going, oh, Third Eye Girl album, and then it was like there's a Third Eye Girl and a Prince album, and it was just like, okay. Weirdly enough, I'm still really, really gunning for the Third Eye Girl album and really anticipating the Third Eye Girl album. But I'll check out this. Obviously, if you want to give me two, I'm happy to have two Prince albums. So really, I wasn't anticipating this one as much as I was Plectrum Electrum. And I was so into, I'd kind of had a renaissance of fandom. Not that I had ever really kind of like dipped into the kind of leave it all behind. But once Third Eye Girl came along, I felt like I did around the Gold era. Like I had that same kind of anticipating stuff coming out. I had that same excitement. There was the Third Eye TV, and this just came along as a surprise at the end of a lot of surprises. And it was a very welcome one.
I want to do a Leah and spoil it do a spoiler for myself.
Go on.
I love this album.
Oh, yay.
This is probably the best album since, and for me, probably since something like Diamonds and Pearls, and maybe even including Diamonds and Pearls.
Woo! I kind of agree. I agree. Yeah, I think this is. Obviously, you had the hit and runs after this album, but this was his last. I think it was a really good. I think in mind and about the artwork and the tracks on there, I get the impression that he had his legacy in mind in terms of, and this is down to the artwork as well on the front cover, and I've got a whole theory about all that as well, that in the glasses, he's looking into space and it's galaxy, and behind him is his legacy because it's the Purple Rain Records behind him. and Maya Washington did the who's Shameless Maya, who some people may know was on the live stream for the Yahoo live stream that he did, and she got very heavily criticised for not knowing certain things, but people didn't realise, and I think she deserves a lot more credit for doing all the artwork for this album and some of the pictures, you know, him at Paisley Park looking down in the studios and stuff. And yeah, so I think this album's a lot about his legacy and preserving his legacy and preserving himself. So obviously he's got Purple Rain behind him, so it's his legacy behind him, but he's also looking into the future, and it's a space. And obviously there's, you know, talk of the album that he was working on before he passed away was like Galaxy and stuff like that. So I think there was going to be some kind of link between his legacy and then what he envisioned and what he was looking at. Hence why there's a galaxy and space in his glasses.
Yeah.
And the whole album in itself, I feel like it kind of reminded me of Vanilla Sky, and please bear with me, in terms of it's preserving, almost like he's being preserved. He's backing up himself. He's backing up his data, and with the little, you know, Mr. Nelson and talking to him, it's almost like he's backing himself up. He's preserving himself. He's preserving himself and preserving his legacy.
Lee,
have
you been drinking corn syrup drinks again? Like, no, I'm kidding.
No.
This is terrific. I love it.
No, a lot of people, a lot of people, and I know Chopin will back me up, and I'm sure Leah will back me up, that people know how much influence this album had on me and how I kind of deconstructed it. You know, I think there was like binary code on the CD, and I tried to look into. I thought there was hidden messages in there, but I completely deconstructed this album. And I said to people, you know, I think, you know, and I said, I'm sure it sounds like he's going into hospital or he's got health problems, because it's, you know, it sounded like there was a nurse there. It's very much like he is preserving himself and preserving his history.
It's like Prince becoming the singularity, you know, with the computers.
Yeah. I mean, it's definitely a concept album, isn't it? I'm only yanking your chain because I think this is exactly the right way to talk about it, because it is a story and it's pretty open-ended, but there are worlds being hinted at here and concepts floating around, and it's a really, really, really interesting whole, right? I think that's why that's one of the reasons I like it so much.
I think it can become more complex with hindsight, i.e. when it sort of came out and when he passed.
And why he passed as well.
Yeah, I wouldn't completely poo-poo it. I never went into the sort of deconstructing it and getting really, really close to this album. I would say that it's one of the best of the latter group of albums that he released. I think there's some weaker stuff on it, but the stuff that's strong is achingly strong in many ways. The theme, I don't think it's a case of he knew there was anything right. If we're sort of edging in that direction, I said this to Leah at the gig. I sort of don't think that there was anything wrong or if there was anything like that. I think it's purely there are echoes of mortality, and he's probably, you know, and he's actually facing, you know, perhaps he's got a twinge in his back type of thing, and he's facing that sort of big black hole and mortality, and those themes are there sort of very, very strongly. As I say, the album there's a lovely juxtaposition there, because the album itself sounds very fresh. It's a new palette. It's as if he's moved into a new studio. And I know there's like the Joshua Welton influence and what have you, but you can really hear there's a different palette of things going on, as well as some familiar things. But I don't look at the theming any stronger than there is plenty of mortality stuff going on there.
I think this is, in my opinion, the most honest Prince album we've ever had.
I agree.
It feels, as much as it is a concept album, I think he's tapping into an honesty that I don't see in any other record that we've had from Prince. Even the fact that when you look at the artwork, it's him in Paisley Park. It is him in his domain. And that's before you even start looking at the lyrical content. I know we're not going into tracks just yet, but you've only got to look at the breakdown. That isn't a concept. That isn't a story. That's him. You can tell that it's an honest write-up and it's coming from the heart. And I think that's why when this album came out for me, I listened to it in a whole different way. And I did what Lee did, and I broke down, excuse the pun, every little bit of this album and the artwork. And I was looking at all the little numbers and reading it, trying to find secret messages as well, because I just saw this honest sincerity that I hadn't seen in him in any other record. And I saw a vulnerability that he seemed to always be hesitant to let us into.
I think that's exactly it, right? When I say concept, I don't think it's like a really well-worked, incredibly cohesive concept, but being Prince, I'm sorry, you took the words out of my mouth, the most honest, vulnerable Prince record we've ever had in many ways.
Mm-hmm.
But being Prince, he still wraps it up in a kind of story code.
Yeah.
And the two things bounce off each other, like the sort of absurd sci-fi stuff in there and the singularity against this very naked, like brutally.
Yeah.
Like there's one line on this record, I bet we all know the line, or those who really like the album, that actually just slays me every time.
There's a couple on this. To be quite honest, there's a couple of lines on this one. It's kind of an interesting album because I was so into the other album, because I was so into Platinum Electrum. I didn't give this the serious listen it deserved until after he died. I liked it, but there was a couple of tracks that stopped me thinking of it as a masterpiece, and still do. There's two particular tracks that kind of drag the average. And until it was like, this is a good Prince album with some great moments, and I was kind of completely obsessed with the other one. But once he passed, there was some bits in this that just like they ricocheted to the front, and it was just like
haunting. It's haunting. I think.
Yeah.
And also, you got to think, anybody with the issues that he had, it doesn't come overnight. It's over a process of years. And if you have chronic pain, and I've had chronic back pain in the past, there are things that go on inside your head when you've got chronic pain that you kind of, it creates a kind of an acceptance that like, it's an interesting place to be sometimes, and that's without the substances, just the kind of going through chronic pain in itself. So even if it's not like, even if it's not a prediction, like he knew he was going to go or something like that, it definitely, if you've got those kind of problems, you think about it anyway, whether you think you are or not. So it had the reflections of those, and they made it, and the fact that he had those thoughts and they made them onto a record is an interesting thing in itself, because sometimes he would kind of obscure the problems he was having. He would put out quite honest things, but they would wrap them up in such kind of idiosyncratic language that actually they would be obscured. But this time it wasn't obscured, and that's the kind of thing I'm kind of impressed with this album.
And I'm not one for conspiracy. Sorry to jump in. I'm not one for conspiracy theories, but I do remember listening to the album and saying to two people that we mutual friends have had, and I just remember, I'm like, I think he's not very well. I'm like, there's something going on, because
I remember you saying that to me.
Yeah, I remember, and I just feel like lyrics like "I'll get a second opinion." I'm like, and the whole futuristic hospital vibe I got from it. It just, I was like, I think there's something going on, and I remember saying that a lot.
I've never thought of this, and still since his death, that stuff doesn't resonate with me so much. I think he was just using, this is just me, I think he was using this stuff as a metaphor to discuss maturity and mortality, regardless of what was about to happen a few years later, but
very much the same.
But the thing that alerted me that this was a good Prince album, this was the thing I'd been waiting for, right? And I'm not saying it's not a masterpiece, but it's really, 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 really good. Like really, five realies, right? And the thing that alerted me was that for the first time in many, many years, you can hear the sincerity in his vocals. His vocal performances bite and they attack, and they don't sound like he's pretending to do anything except convey something that he cares about. He sounded like he cared about something for me for the first time in years.
Yeah, no, I agree. And I think it links back to that whole, about honesty and it being an honest album for him. I think if this was his last album, I think a lot of the Prince scholars and I think a lot of the music industry would have deconstructed it a hell of a lot more if that was his last album. I think
it would be like his Black Star from Bowie, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. No, exactly that. Yeah,
it's really weird you should mention Black Star, because I was thinking the other day. Sorry, this is a little bit morbid, but there's a direct parallel, so forgive me for going there. But like, had he known he was going and he had a certain amount of time, it's hard to sort of imagine what kind of thing he could have possibly put out. And I don't mean this as sort of they got an amazing album, just his ability to sonically convey things. What would a Prince style Black Star have been like? It would have been quite something amazing, I suspect. But it was interesting you brought that up, because I've been thinking about that later.
But with Prince, obviously, he was, he had the reputation of never looking back and never referring to old material. But to have, yeah, exactly. But to have Purple Rain in the background on the album, it almost bookends his legacy. It's almost like it is a bookend.
Like the gold standard.
Yeah, he's wearing gold.
Yeah.
So it's like he is the gold standard.
Well, there's times he did it a little in his career before, right? But they never really convinced me. Like Let It Go is like that's like, to me, baby stuff compared to what he really, really tries to examine here. Or baby stuff's a little strong. I think what I mean is that it sounds like he wanted to break through something on Let It Go, but he didn't really have the conviction or the emotional openness to do it. And then you hear something like Breakdown, and then you go, this is what he was trying to say on Let It Go, but he's ready to talk now. And then you hear something like Way Back Home, and you go,
well, look, Way Back Home is a thing. And Way Back Home is kind of like Crystal Ball. It's like the song is just like, it almost like kind of leaps away from the album itself in the sense that it is such a high point that it kind of elevates past the album it's on.
It's massive. I used the word achingly earlier.
Yeah. With the affirmations as well.
Achingly amazing. Yes, very much so.
It reminds me a little of that Heartbeat song by Robin. What was it? With Just One Heartbeat or something, that electro pop ballad, which was really good. Yeah. It's got a similar sort of colour to that, but it's Prince doing it, and it's so raw.
With the like square wave bass like rumbling underneath, it's
and some real high end kind of high register piano-y type things going on.
And I love that what he did was he got a string arrangement for it, and rather than put the string arrangement on the song, he just cuts up the string arrangement and creates these affirmations and bookends the song. Does
everyone know the line I'm thinking of on this album? And it's from that song that is just extraordinary.
Well, there's several.
I'll tell you the one that does it for me, and then you all can maybe have. Maybe some of you have this one. Maybe you have different ones. The one that on this whole album is just like, most people are born dead, but I was born alive.
That was just one I was thinking of.
I can't say it without almost falling apart. It's so painful.
It's desperate. But desperation about it just kills me every time.
But I think that I've read about those happy endings, but they're still a mystery. And let me tell you about me. And it's just like, that's like kind of,
But talking about Breakdown and honesty, sorry to jump in again. I don't know if Leah might remember, and I'm sure Chopin might. There was a fan-made video that he kind of released where it was cut. It was clips of Analyze This, and it was almost like a fan-made video
That was for the breakdown, wasn't it?
Was it for the breakdown? Yeah,
it was for the breakdown. It wasn't for this one. This one had I think this one had like just like a still image kind of audio on it. But
I'm getting loads of flashbacks now.
I know it's the whole period is like this,
yeah.
That there was a video for Breakfast Can Wait, like, you know.
Yeah.
This particular song, this is a kind of like that moment we had with The Word. I think, and songs like Crystal Ball. I mean, this is a hushed tones kind of talk about this song in hushed tones. It is. I remember there was a boat party that we had just after he passed. It was only a couple of months after he passed, and you know, like everybody was doing Sometimes It Snows in April. Everybody was playing tributes with Purple Rain. Sometimes It Snows in April. Nothing Compares to You. But I remember there was a moment of silence at the Prince party, and then they played this, and I am telling you, like I hadn't really cried about it because really hadn't, because most of the time I had people like clinging on to me crying, because I was like, you know, when I was going to meet Prince fans, they would be crying on me. So it's just like, I was kind of quite distracted, and I was very concentrated on, well, we've still got the music. And I didn't, you know, was kind of like doing the whole, well, I didn't know him personally, so it's sad that we're not going to have the concerts, but we still have the music. We've still got something to celebrate. But when that song played after that moment of silence, I bawled, like, and like the whole room was a mess, like in a good way, in a kind of unified way. And I was just like, everybody, like everybody else was playing these kind of Nothing Compares to You, Purple Rain, Sometimes It Snows in April, which is great, and they're great songs. But like that was like, oh, actually, he said something that close to the end
it's
that
not
bookended
like,
his life.
The interesting thing is we all know that he made emotional music. Like Purple Rain is high emotion, the whole album, right? But it's always it's theatrical, right?
Yeah.
And you know, there's pain all over the place in Prince. I often think that one of the things that unites Prince fans is we like the pain of feeling a bit weird, or we respond to it, right?
Yeah.
But he never put it all in one place and referenced himself like he did on this album. That's the difference. And like even referring to himself as Mr. Nelson, or having people refer to him as Mr. Nelson, you can hear that he's like, I just want to be a person again. I am a person. I want to show you the person underneath that's got a surname. I've spent a whole career. I was gifted this absurd name, and it dovetailed with what I became. Yeah. But I don't have to change myself into a symbol this time and go on another theatrical adventure. I just want to be a person with a surname, it feels like.
Yeah. It's like actually sitting back and looking at the icon that you've made, and kind of actually, and it's interesting that the people, this kind of leads on to that concert he had, the piano and microphone concert he had at Paisley Park. And when people were coming back, they were like, they were saying two things, and it was multiple people who had said to me, and they weren't necessarily hanging around with each other and having those conversations with each other. The two things they said were, he looks very, very unwell. There's something very, very wrong. And the second thing that they said was, he's making that place into a museum. He said, because I've never seen anything. There's timelines, there's everything. He said, it looks like he's making the place into a museum, and they were kind of very worried. And it was a lot, but then he announced like the tours, the Australian tour, and then it was kind of forgotten for a while, obviously, until the inevitable.
There was actually a lot of concept artwork that Blue done for rooms and having the rooms change. Yeah, exactly. So there was a lot of stuff floating around, and a lot of people that came back from the show in January said exactly the same thing.
There was also that
so many of us saw it. I mean, I remember, sorry, Chopin, when I saw him in Manchester in 2014, in one of the small venues, and I was a couple of rows back. And I think some of you were there, but I was I had tickets. So it was that whole palaver of some of us had tickets in advance and some of us didn't.
Yeah.
And I was one of the lucky ones that got them in advance. So the people that I went with were like a good 10 rows behind. Yeah. And after the show, I didn't even say hello to them. I just walked straight up to them and went, he's dying. Something is wrong. And it wasn't.
Which show was that again? Sorry.
That was the Manchester Academy. So this was
The
14.
hit and run, the phase 2 one when he came back. Yeah.
But it was,
2015.
it was the first night of those 2 shows. And it wasn't that he played badly or anything like that. There was just, with him, there was always a mischief behind the eyes. And that night, there was no mischief behind the eyes. He was kind of going through the motions, but with no flair. So I think there was a notable change around this period, which I think is hard to, I don't think you see it on videos, but I think if you're someone that saw him a lot, I think if you saw him in person around this time, those were the people that were latching on and going, actually, something isn't right.
It was the constant, like, I remember going and waiting in queues for hours and then going into like Electric Ballroom and King's Place gigs and the Roundhouse, and it was and then people would go to other gigs and stuff, and it was just like a kind of murmur that was around. And I don't know, here's the thing, I don't know if the murmur was just kicked off by this record and that song, or whether it was
I think there was a visually a definite difference with him. I remember, because I used to upload on social media, pictures throughout the year, and I remember, seeing a picture like the early 2015, and he looks like Prince. And then I remember seeing the passport photo that jokingly got posted to say, this was his passport photo when he was going to Australia, and you can see the difference. He looked very gaunt. There was definitely a difference. And I think, like you said, there was murmurs, and perhaps people like me read too much into this album, but I think there's definitely something there. Is like we've mentioned, the honesty and the referencing himself as Mr. Nelson, which you would on any documentation in terms of hospitals or birth certificates or anything like that. You are that Mr. Nelson. That's so the documentation element to it as well. So it's very much, I am a person, I am a human. So I agree with what Andy said earlier.
Yeah, I think it's interesting as well that, like, I think any other track on this album, we would have just talked about the track, but Way Back Home is like, it's too big. It goes into it, like, this is how spectacular the track is. We leave behind talking about the song itself and go into everything that was happening at the time. I think it's such a big emotion, and like you say, Andy, like an honest declaration in some ways, that actually I find it hard to just talk about the song other than saying it's great, because it leads into these other conversations about what was going on at the time and how fans were feeling at the time. Myself, I was hearing it all the time and not really, I don't think I was internalizing it, because I was just having a great time with those gigs and was really amped up for like Third Eye Girl. But I remember hearing it and kind of going, well, that's kind of interesting, it makes sense, but it's,
I know that, like, the geeky
bringing it back to the song itself, that is actually a kind of masterpiece of a song. And I think it's a real there's a real tribute that it's considered like the last song or the final statement, even though there's 2 albums after it. Like, that's how great that song is, that it kind of makes the entire album seem like, it nullifies the 2 albums that come out afterwards in a way.
I would have preferred this. I would have preferred Hit and Runs to come and then this to be his last. I would have preferred it in that order. I think, no offense to Hit and Run or anything like that, but they're just tracks on there. They don't feel like a concept album. They're just tracks that are placed as a track list. I think this is the last album that he had an idea in terms of tracks and the affirmations and everything like that. I think that's an album. I think the Hit and Runs are just tracks that they've just put on the album. I'm probably going to get hated for that one, but
no, I think that's definitely true of Hits 2, but Hit and Run Phase 2, I wouldn't agree with it with Hit and Run Phase 1.
I'd be the other way around. I'd say Hits 2 feels like it's more coherent to me in some ways. But I'd also like to say that I think Paddy said that actually this is brimming with new ideas and there's a juxtaposition. And we're all talking about it like Actually, I'm not. You guys are. There's a danger of talking about this, like, this really sort of morbid and downer kind of elegiac album, and it's not just that. There's a hell of a lot of freshness here. And actually, when I listen to the album, as much as all the, the deep personal lyrical stuff, it's allied to his freshest music for years. New ideas, like working with a new producer. Lots of comedy in there amongst all of this stuff too. And it makes me think, and it was starting to spill out, the Mr. Nelson idea goes on to hits 2, or is it 1 or 2? Sorry.
1,
sorry. And and it becomes a sort of like cartoon techno thing, right? And it actually, this was the album that I've been waiting for a long time.
Same.
It was the album where he would mature his sound, update his sound, but be Prince with it, not be trying to do anything, not be trying to catch up with rap, not be trying to catch up with whatever, not be trying to make another female protege pop sensation at the age of 55 or whatever, but actually mature and update his sound. And he doesn't do it like 100% successfully here, but there is so much success. It's a real move forward, and it actually just makes me, this more than anything makes me think, oh boy, he had more to give.
Yeah, I mean, I think musically it's not even with the more, like you say, even with the morbidity of the kind of themes of that, it's still like opens up with a piece of like basically stadium rave. It's kind of like it opens up with, I mean, I love that track. I love that opener. It's there's a few little bells and whistles that are kind of like thingy, but mostly it sounds like a really kind of like a heavily produced Strange But True.
About the opener. It was the first opener on a Prince album for some time. I thought, wow, this is really, really good.
Yeah.
But I just love the way it started out immediately it sounded kind of very produced, as you've said, a lot of modern synth sound. You have a lovely little pedal point note descending funk riff after the initial chords, because the funk guitar bit's the same as the chords. It's just played in like triplets and stuff. And double stops, and it's absolutely gorgeous. But then it goes on to do loads of different things and never comes back to its original simplicity as it builded. And I just thought, wow, this is, again, like going back to the new stuff, it was just blew me out of the water a bit, that one. Great. And
Paddy, I don't know about you, but I thought that guitar tone he has for those kind of Mixolydian kind of guitar solos towards the end is just amazing.
Yeah.
His guitar
tone, the one he has at the beginning is custom prints. That's like neck pickup telly. You can hear, but like you say, then towards the end you have this weird sort of very, very produced guitar sound. It was as if he put everything into a box on that first song. And then I'm probably not quite where a lot of you are with this album, but again, it stays strong after this as well, sort of thing. But no, brilliant opening track.
I just wanted to.
This album doesn't even start until Clouds. I skip this track pretty much every single time I put on the album.
I'm somewhere between you and Paddy. I said he wasn't playing catch up, but this does sound in some ways derivative. It's EDM. You're like, oh, you're working with a producer who's 30 years younger than you. That's a good idea, but he's also not a top producer. He's making kind of cookie cutter stuff. Then again, there is enough weirdness in this EDM track and enough Prince and enough kind of we're using the template of that genre, but we are adding enough to it that it does convince me overall.
It's fascinating. It's fascinating that you can hear somebody else's production. Having said that, he wasn't a known producer, but I couldn't see Prince ever working with a known producer.
No.
So in a sense, it's beautiful that he got the balance of somebody he trusted enough to genuinely. I mean, again, it carries over a lot more heavily into Hit and Run 1, but to hear somebody's influence just dribble gently over into his sound. perhaps you could equate it with a Wendy and Lisa thing, or an Eric Leeds thing, or a Fisher thing. This is I hadn't heard anything like this, or that kind of unique one person, one personality sort of just start to seep in a bit.
True. The reason I wouldn't. I get, the quality difference is that when he worked with Wendy and Lisa and Eric Leeds, they were bringing things to his sound that didn't sound like dialing in from other genres. They were artists bringing in their own flavors. And Josh on this one does sound like someone who knows how to do EDM, and that's cool. And it's kind of good enough, but I like it more and more as I listen to it, that first track, to be honest. But I want to go to what Leah said, really, because Clouds is probably his best song since about 1995 for me, really. It's great.
I love listening to it on airplanes, ironically. I was listening to it on the way to Minneapolis. Absolutely loved it. And then obviously the performance he did on SNL as well. Absolutely love this track. Love this track. It's got colours in it that are things that just remind me, without being derivative, of things like in Pop Life or Around the World in a Day. And big bright pianos and big synthy basses that sound updated, but so Prince.
This track always reminds me of, and my timeline might be mixed up here, so if anybody else has dates and this is wrong, please tell me.
I'll come and find you.
Yeah, I remember the press conference that was meant to happen. I don't know if any of you guys were in on this.
House.
And yeah, well, it was Leanne LaHavis's house, but originally what wasn't meant to be there. And there was this campaign from a certain newspaper that wanted a fan to go with them to the press conference. That was me. I
remember some of that. Wasn't it to do with The Guardian or something?
Yeah, and I was at college studying music at the time, and I get a call back and they're like, yeah, we would like you to join us as kind of the person in the know, really, to guide our report to the press conference. I was like, okay, cool. So they told me to go down to London, and then I'm waiting in a pub in London. I think I was 17 at the time, something like that. And basically Prince then declared that it was going to be at Leanne LaHavis's house and no press were invited except for, was it Six Music? Someone like that.
Yeah.
So I basically wasted a trip. And that was the night, I'm sure it was the same night that he did the electric ballroom. And I've told that story before where I got on the train and just as the doors closed, everyone's like, get to the electric ballroom. So as much as I absolutely adore this album, whenever Clouds comes on and I hear Leanne's voice, I'm like swearing under my breath.
Not mentioning anybody's names, but two people on this podcast made it to the sound check and then was in the newspaper the following day. I don't know who that is, but there's two people on this podcast.
Yeah,
who was in the newspaper and then got the phone call. That got the phone call going, have you seen the newspaper? And then obviously it was, I think we were like page three in the Metro.
For the first time in my life. I would have let you cut the queue. I would have let you cut the queue if you got on the next stop and came back.
That was an insane night, yes.
Yeah, it was.
I want to jump into what Andy said earlier about the humour. So obviously, Breakfast Can Wait, the single, obviously the cover of the single was Dave Chappelle from the sketch that he did on the Chappelle show of the basketball, and then obviously he put it as the front cover of the single, and then Dave Chappelle was on Jimmy Fallon, and he said, well, that's what Prince does, he just judo flips it, you do an impersonation of him, he then puts that impersonation of him on the front cover of a single, and he goes, what am I going to do, sue him because I'm dressed like him? And it was like, you know, there were still elements of the prankster and that, you know, that he could laugh at himself, and he, you know, and again back to the, you know, there's different elements of him on the album, or almost milestones of elements of his personality, and one of them is the prankster. You know, he can laugh at himself, and I think that came across.
And he does New Girl, and he does the New Girl episode.
And he does New Girl, yeah, exactly.
He seems so comfortable. It was like just seeing that cover, that single cover, made me go. Prince Prince is in a comfortable place right now. He's not being spiky. He's not being defensive. Even before I'd heard the whole album, you know, I was just like, this is Prince being cool and relaxed again. As much as the album is intense, that move was very funny.
And the other point, sorry, just to continue, was that you talked about, you know, working with a young producer. Breakfast Can Wait. The music video was directed by Danny Lee, who was Curly Fries, who was on one of the other albums, and she was 18 at the time, and she directed the video for Breakfast Can Wait, and now she's gone on and she signed to Def Jam. There's been some controversy the last couple of years of, obviously she was with DaBaby, and then one of her songs, Yellow Bone, caused some controversy, but she directed that music video, and she's gone on to sign with Def Jam. So he always, you know, again with like Lizzo and Danny Lee, he always saw talent, and you know, he was a strong influence, and they've gone on to bigger things. But again, that was, you know, that music video for Breakfast Can Wait, you know, it's very young, sexy, you know, red-haired girl dancing and stuff like that, and making breakfast in the morning. It was, you know, very much, and she's dressed as him again. So again, it's, you know,
I have never seen the video. I've never watched it.
Yeah,
it's brilliant. Yeah, it's a very, very, a very good video. Yeah.
I think tying into the humor as well. Again, sorry to bring the Andy Allo thing up, but we know that's my specialism.
Yeah.
Obviously, Andy's all over this album, and actually, if you listen to her first album, Unfresh, which has nothing to do with Prince, it's before she met him, and you listen to the lyrical content of what she was naturally writing at the time, and then listen to her verses and the lyrical content, particularly on the duet tracks, they are just Andy's lyrics, the comedic rap kind of R&B stuff. That a lot of that has come from Andy. And if you listen to Fresh, and then later on the Prince influence with Superconductor, you will see the major parallels. And I think you can really see when you listen to who Andy was before she met Prince, and then this album, you can really see how they kind of affected each other, and it being a result of her kind of influencing him.
I was really surprised, actually, that them two didn't have like a duet album, like a full-on duet album, not like a Superconductor or the acoustic We Can Love thing that they did for Tidal, which was great. But that was one of the few times where I was really surprised that, like, I thought there was enough kind of songs that kind of leaked out over the years that could have been a full-on album. Maybe that's in the vault, you know.
There is a track, which I'm sure you're aware of, Chopin, called You Will Be. I never wanted an official release of a song more in my life.
Yeah.
I just need Andy Allo to play a Disney princess and sing that song.
It's
sure
a great
she'll be
song.
a Disney princess at some point. But yeah, back to your point, Leah, Andy Allo Unfresh album, I love that album. And there's 2 tracks on there, Fly Away and Dreamland. I love Dreamland. And that's you can see a lot of that. Well, I can hear a lot of that in this album. You know, I think Dreamland, I get the whole, it's very, very similar. I highly recommend it. If you've not listened to it, I'd highly recommend listening to it.
My note for Clouds really was, how can something so light hit so hard?
Ooh.
That
sounds like a Rolling Stone quote.
It's so light and kind of bouncy, but it's really like, it's a really kind of deep song. It's absolutely beautiful.
Yeah.
And
very smooth. Again, I'd probably, because it's my bias and leaning, I'd probably slightly prefer Artificial Cage. But no, Clouds is a brilliant song. As you know, I'm not one to go for lyrics, but the sort of little staccato kiss in the neck than expect. It really does nail a little perfect popism there. Really nice track. And the backing vocals on the breakdown and stuff as well. It's very, very nice to put together track. A good one for a second track on an album, definitely.
Also, the kind of like Mr. Nelson bit where you've been in stasis for 40, about 40 years. It's just like, it kind of really actually speaks to that thing that Andy said about, like, you know, like, I became a star and then, you know, I was separated from myself, and now I want to get back to being me. And I think that's a kind of an interesting, I think that really reflects, that's another place where it really reflects really hard that he was looking at the iconic status externally.
This is a great song. I mean, there's so many things going on. It's a brilliant song with many moving parts. It never folds in on itself. It just goes from one thing to the next, and it advances the weird story of the album halfway through the song with all the Mr. Nelson, you're in stasis stuff. But it's like, it's kind of a suite, the song, really, because it does a lot of work. It's kind of like joint to joint, but in a more coherent form or something. It takes time out to say, oh, by the way, let's keep the plot of the album going.
Yeah.
And then back to the song again. And then it's got a kind of this weird thing about, a kiss on the neck, a flower every hour, that all lovely, weird, daffy Prince stuff. But then this whole thing about when life's a stage in this, modern age and everything, which seems a bit more profound. Yeah. So it has about three big themes going through it, and it just sounds good.
It's always good when you take notes from Prince on your love life, kiss on the neck. It's like, write notes. Go on,
chance will be a fine thing, mate.
Exactly.
Not happening for me right now, but that was a bit personal. That was my my way home here, everybody. But no, but it is a very light song with lots of punch to it, sonically and in what it's doing.
Yeah. And again, a great guitar solo at the end with a real great guitar tone.
Exactly, just
nowhere.
Like it's a whole show, that song. It's a whole show, and it really makes me happy. He hadn't painted in those colours for so long for me.
Yeah.
Can we talk about my favourite song?
Go on.
The album. My favourite track is Time.
Oh, Andy, obviously.
Ooh.
Oh, controversial. Shopes.
No. I to be quite honest, I really like this song. I really do. This is where I kind of, because my notes for this one is exact kind of almost like I said before, was like I do actually for Time, I do like I said, imagine this rock and roll love affair. This is what it feels like. You will be with me. And Time on an album, and that would be the Andy Allo Prince album. And it's kind of like you look at the list of songs they released kind of together or kind of didn't release with You Will Be With Me, but there was a quality album in that, and it got cut up and kind of spread over these other albums. So this, as good as Time is, it's kind of why I don't see this as a whole masterpiece as an album, because I think it's got bits of a masterpiece kind of parachuted into the album. And so I see this more as a list of songs than some of the other songs about this time. I see this more as a playlist of songs that it's just got a great intro from a masterpiece album, a great outro from a masterpiece album, and a couple of other bits from that masterpiece album, but not all from the same album.
I don't hear that at all. I hear Time as being the I can see people nodding already, and they know what I'm going to say, and I don't know what I'm going to say. But you're right. I am going to say what you want me to say, which is that it feels like the kind of it feels like the place of kind of. I think it feels like the post-coital cigarette after the album. It feels like the kind of let's process everything that's come before and just let this mellow out. Maybe that's not what you thought I was going to say. I don't know what I'm saying now. It feels to me like a very logical end to the album.
Yes, I agree.
Let's let everything settle. It's nothing in this song is going to be anything other than dunka 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 on the beat. It is so assured. You know what it reminds me of? The mature. It reminds me of a grown-up version of something like Gigolo's
Get Lonely Too.
Get Lonely Too. Sorry, is that the one I'm thinking of? The big ballad at the end of the at the end of the Time album. Yeah. It's just got that assuredness to it. Or 2 + 2 + 2 is 6 from Vanity, right? It's those great big, lush, solid on the beat electronic ballads that he used to write back then.
Yeah.
It couldn't sound more Prince. Great Prince if it tried, but it's grown up at the same time.
I think for me, I relate it back to the word quite a lot, in that I made a point when we were doing that podcast about how it's got so many different riffs in it, and so many artists would have put those into different songs and made whole songs out of them. And this for me has exactly the same thing. There's one riff that always stays in my brain from this, and it's when Prince does the guitar, do 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 do, and it's like a call and response, and Andy comes.
Oh yeah.
And I'm like, that could be a separate riff to a different song. And these little melodies brought together, it creates this almost dreamy, sleepy, fun.
It's just what I used to love about Prince. He would just put a template out. He'd cut a piece of cloth that long, and then he would just embroider perfect little doodles all over it, and the embroidery would come at the right place in the track, and then just when you thought it couldn't get any more pretty, or it couldn't get any more inventive, or there wasn't enough, he's doing another one. And that is what I mean when it sounds like classic Prince.
Andy, that is the perfect description of the way that he improvised on tracks. That is the perfect description. Although it's kind of to the point where I'm almost actually kind of going to take myself back and go, actually, it kind of does fit on the album, because Andy Allo does a callback to the you keep breaking me down. So yeah, it does actually have a callback to another song on the album. So I take back that thing. I was just thinking that June might sit really nicely there, but actually with that callback, yeah, I take that back almost instantly now. It
is the post-coital. It is the unwinding. It's the post-coital cigarette.
You're right.
It happens.
Okay,
that's a good way of putting it. The two tracks that I would like to have seen on this album is probably Free Yourself and Ain't Gonna Miss You. I think somewhere in that, I think it feels like that era.
I love Ain't Gonna Miss You.
And Free Yourself, I think they would kind of fit with like Gold Standards and stuff like that. And with Free Yourself, I always have this. And again, with this album as well, it's the imagery that you can see listening to these tracks, clouds floating, almost meditation of it.
But what song would you take off?
I don't know.
I know the two songs I would take off if I had to fit into other songs. Like there's two obvious.
Which ones?
Well, I guess they could Funk and Roll remix, because I think there should have been just a remix album around this time. There were so many good little kind of just rock remixes. I think they're probably but the songs. This is going to be controversial.
Sorry.
Remember,
you took back your opinion on Time. You don't.
No, I'm not going to take I'm not going to take back my opinions on these two. Gold Standard and This Could Be Us.
I think this is up for grabs. I think the thing about this album is that it's not all Rocket Fuel. Definitely, there are a few drags. I do think as well, though, the more you listen to this album, you start filling in. When it first came out, I thought, my God, as I say, there is a sincerity. There's a hunger there. Again, there's something I haven't heard for years. This is the best stuff I've heard from him in years. But hey, the album kind of drags here and there. The more I listened to it, the more I started hearing connections between songs that didn't feel connected at first. And I do think it gets thicker and thicker. However, it could probably use a little shot of adrenaline here and there and a bit of trimming elsewhere. And This Would Be Us could probably stand to go, but it does. On the other hand, I
would have flipped it and put the remix on there. Weirdly enough, the remix I think is way better than the song.
I haven't really listened to the remix enough, but the thing is, when you start listening to it and getting really into the album, you do hear stuff like on This Could Be Us about the door and the cage that fits back into the breakdown, and there are enough ties between most of the songs that it actually makes them harder to sort of throw out in a balloon debate, because they do tie the album together. The Gold Standard, I think, is easier to chuck out because he's done it before many, many times better. And it doesn't do much for the album.
Can I just say what I've got? Like I said, this is the first time I've written down stuff for anything. Gold Standard is actually, I will say, is the note I've got for it is this could have been on Emancipation. It could have been on a New Power Soul. It could have been on Rave. It could have been an MPG Music Truck Club track. It could have been on Musicology 3121. Planet Earth, MPLS Sound or 2010 is literally kind of like last 20 years filler. It's so generic as a Prince track. I'm indifferent, and actually is one of the songs that pulls down the overall rating of the album.
I think
interesting.
To me, it's just like it doesn't sound like this era.
No, I agree.
Sounds like anything post 96 Prince, apart from maybe early 2000s Rainbow Children news kind of era.
I agree. Like, I do genuinely agree, but this track for me is what helps with that whole, we were talking about Prince looking back on his career and reflecting. Okay. I kind of interpreted this track when it came on. I remember playing it to my dad for the first time, and he was like, oh my God, it sounds like something from 1983. And he was super into it because he's an 80s person.
Yeah.
And he got really excited by it. And at the time, I kind of very much interpreted it like that, as Prince kind of paying homage to himself. And I interpreted it that way. So I think if you were to remove that, for me, it would take away some of that element of him accepting who he is as an artist and that reflection that this album does.
There you go. So there are enough arguments for all of the songs that they relate to something else in the album. But although I'm more with Chopin here, I do think that it's a type of Prince track we've heard many times before. I think it's like a pretty darn good one as they go, but it doesn't help the album much at all. I could live without it.
If you think about other tracks from this era, think about like the X's face going into would be, like something like that would be the rocket fuel, whereas Gold Standard going into is just like,
oh my God, X's face would have been amazing on here. I love I think X's face
better on here.
X's Face is again one of the best songs he did in the 21st century.
Or Hard Rock Lover. Instead of this could be this could be us.
I'm not going to let you have Hard Rock Lover on this album,
okay.
But X's Face, hell yes, actually.
Okay, I'll go with one. All right, that's all right.
To answer your question, Chopin, I would have taken off Funk and Roll and This Could Be Us, and I would have replaced it with Free Yourself and Ain't Gonna Miss You.
I'd be happy with that. That'd be cool.
Yeah, I'd probably do that. And back to the point where we talked about humor and stuff. You remember This Can Be Us? The artwork for that was a meme. It was Prince on the bike, isn't it? And it's like This Could Be Us, but you're playing. So that was used as the artwork. And then that was his, his love of memes and laughing at memes and resharing memes and stuff. And obviously that was used again. So it's insane.
I'm now just absolutely knocked out by the idea of X's Face replacing the Gold Standard. I think it would be amazing. I'm listening to it in my head. And sorry, just to go slightly off topic onto X's Face, I wish X's Face was 2 minutes longer as well. I freaking love that track.
Okay. Gold Standard. I think I get exactly what you say about it could sit on any other album, and it's very sort of timeless Prince. I wouldn't go as far as to say it's a filler on this one. I think it's still fairly strong. So I suppose I'll be the contrary one. I cannot see what people see in Breakfast Can Wait. That is one of the thinnest, dullest tracks for me he's ever done.
I semi-agree, but then Camille makes an appearance and everything else doesn't matter.
I fully don't say that's Camille's voice.
I would take, Breakfast Can Wait, This Could Be Us, and what it feels like. To me, they really do just pull the album down.
I really like this.
High, stays high, drops in the middle, and then at the end goes high again.
You would get rid of
Pardon?
You would get rid of
Yeah, I would. It does not.
I think is fantastic.
The monosyllabic, the sort of monosyllabic sort of attack of the vocal.
The monotone, yeah.
Does anybody have Paddy's address? Because I'm just about to have a hitman.
And the other thing is, the version of Funk and Roll, and please, I'm not comparing it directly, but there's an aspect to the back dancers for me there. The way he's approached doing what he's doing. It's based on something else. I'm assuming
I get that.
The instrumental part, the instrumental one came first. And of the two, I'd probably prefer the one on Plectrum Electrum. But I think there's a lot to be said for that. And there's a little sort of schizophrenic, sit in the studio, see what you can do, bat dancisms there as well.
Just to clarify,
it's that quality, but
just to clarify, I didn't say I didn't like it. I just was like, I think there were so many good remixes around this time that a remix album would have been actually worthwhile in and of itself, and that's where that would kind of fit.
And also,
I like it though.
Also, sorry, just to reiterate, I think the gold standard is okay, but I don't think it's doing a good job on this album.
That's fair.
I think it's okay as well, but that's my problem with it.
I think it's so I think Chopin hit the nail on the head in a sense. It's so generic, and then when you say it doesn't do the album any good, no, it doesn't, because if you've got tracks of the quality of sort of Way Back Home, But there must have been something else he could have used.
I'm making a fine distinction. I think it's a good version of a generic Prince track. It's good. It's good within its. But as far as they go, I would like push Life of the Party off a cliff tomorrow, right? I mean, but and there's a million like that. But I would just tell to just sod off. But Gold Standard is it's in the higher end of just another Prince track, but it's shit. But anyway, it has no place on this album really in the final analysis.
Chopin, would you mind telling Paddy that I'm no longer talking to him because he said he didn't like and he's taking it off the album?
So Paddy, Lee's not talking to you anymore.
And Paddy, I've got to say, mate, you are on very thin ice with me as well. I mean, it's lucky you're such a big 80s head, so I'm giving you credit, but...
it's like my favourite track on the album, and he's like, "Oh yeah, just take it off." It's
great track.
What can I say? Isn't that the beauty of the whole thing, though?
Yeah.
Leah, you're gonna give me some money, and we're hiring a hitman. Yeah, taking Paddy out. He said,
to be honest, I'm taking out a hitman on all of you because all of you want to change this album. So I'm gonna buy a balaclava.
Okay.
I want to take issue with you on Camille coming into Breakfast Can Wait. That's not Camille.
I mean, it's
nah.
No, because it's not tape speed. It's a pitch shift.
But also, even
Josh could have got it wrong.
No. Even for me, I mean, I'm going to be a twit about this, but no, Camille is such a subtle effect, and this is let's make this such a chipmunk, ridiculous cartoon voice. He doesn't even sing in time. It's hilarious. I mean, I like it just fine, but it's just not Camille. It's not what Camille does to me emotionally at all.
Okay, debate.
But when you listen to the lyrical content, would Prince have said those things?
Yeah, Prince did lots of things with his voice, but they're not when he slows down his voice, there's a Bob George slowdown, and then there's a Rainbow Children slowdown, and then there's a slowdown on Erotic City. They didn't all have one character name or any character names. They don't. They're just different personae or just games. But I just don't. I would never classify this voice as Camille. Is all.
I will say this though about our Breakfast Can Wait. It was the last song that anybody who wasn't a Prince fan came up to me and told me about. They're like, "Have you heard this new Prince the new Prince song, Breakfast Can Wait?" Because it was being played on Six Music, and it was the last one that anybody came up to me. There was a couple of people at work, and there was other people in social. They were like, "I really like it."
Last one for me was Rock and Roll Love Affair. That got people who weren't Prince fans saying, "Oh my God, have you heard the new Prince song?" Of course you have, but it sounds like it's like Dylan or Tom Petty. People were saying to me, and I really liked that. I really like that sort of went out of the normal sphere of influence for Prince songs too.
I think we've broken some new ground tonight. Shortly after recording of Artificial Age, the PPUK Podcast team disbanded.
Don't, because I'll write that article. Don't make me do it.
We asked for his comments. Lee said, "Who's Paddy? I've never heard of him."
Yeah. You've got a gig next week that I'm not going to now.
I'm refunding my ticket.
You'll wear a t-shirt saying Paddy sucks.
You've got to shout out for us to play. That's what
That's it now.
In Associated Artists news, in 7 minutes 9 seconds, an eBay auction for George Clinton's album Computer Games on LP is finishing, and I intend to win it. I shouldn't have told you, because if you want it, you can get on now and bid against me.
By the time this podcast goes out, it would be done.
No, I mean you people. I'm thinking of Chopin.
You could, if you need to take a kind of break to kind of like do the finishing bids, that's all good.
No, I'll live if I don't get it, but I've been after Computer Games for a while, and anyone who hasn't listened to George Clinton's output from the 80s is listening to this podcast. There's a Associated Artist recommendation, because man had tunes.
Yeah.
You want to talk about like the last affirmation? Obviously, it's 3 minutes and something long, and obviously Leanna, how do you pronounce her name? Leanna Havis. Yeah, and obviously her vocals and how much of it's the end of the album, and it's almost as if someone's falling asleep. Not that it makes you fall asleep, but it's that you're being relaxed and you're almost not being medicated, but there's an element of you're just sitting back and you're just reflecting. And I think that's another point of the album. It's very much self-reflection and relaxing and meditating, and that's what I get from it anyway.
It's a sort of a reprise of Way Back Home in many ways, sonically.
Yeah.
Which is not a bad thing at all. If I put them on, when I put them on playlists, I put those two songs together because it feels very, very natural. But yeah, it does. That's. I mean, we've had everything else about melancholy, mortality. You listen to Affirmation 3, and it really, really feels like he's reaching for something in a big way. But yeah, beautiful song. There's some absolute massive gold nuggets at the end.
It's kind of like it's like the coda to the coda, because Time is kind of the coda to the album, and then and then it's just like, oh, hang on, let's just go and pick up that other plot line too as well and bring everything together. So like really, really considered piece of work. And that's what when I say that, I did think that it was like half a great album to me at first, with lots of drag in the middle. Over time, the pieces have linked up, and I appreciate things a lot more. And it doesn't, it's like, oh, there's only 3 songs that drag now. Now there's only 2. I might change a couple, but like it fills in and it fills in. The album talks to itself, and it just keeps doing that.
How come we have not spent any time on Breakdown?
That's what I was literally about to say.
I would love to talk about that song.
As somebody who's not that into ballads, and I have to say, I think Time is a sort. I'm probably not where sort of you and Leah in that are, but I do like Time as a ballad. But Breakdown's an absolute classic, sort of in the style of Empty Room, Descending Pattern. Just another achingly. This is it about this album. Achingly beautiful, deep, melancholy. Really, really good. Really, really good.
I mean, that line, there's a wall, there's a door that you can walk through where there used to be a wall. Kind of like, I mean, it can be interpreted in so many ways, because like literally this is the first song back on Warner Brothers after the kind of independent years. So you can look at it that way. You can look at it in personal relationships. There's so many ways to look at it. So it's great. It's
probably everything at once. When people go through changes, that everything starts to feel like all those grievances fall away. You find a new way to be, and it does sound like he's gone through something. The door is the obvious metaphor, but it really sounds like he means it. I think almost nowhere else on this album does he sound like he means it. On Way Back Home for sure, and on this one, quite as much as when he really does that big delivery. There's a door where there used to be a wall. It's a huge. It's like the Beautiful Ones, but about himself for real.
I remember being at one of the London Prince parties, and someone pointed at a picture that was like the promo image for the Breakdown, the fro with like the brown top. And I think she'd had a few to drink. And every time I think of the Breakdown, I think of this woman. She just pointed and she was like, "The Breakdown, Prince, you're breaking my heart." And when
tell me who that is after this podcast, please.
I actually genuinely don't remember. It was someone that I didn't know at the time.
Probably
so if
me.
that person listened, Please let me know.
I want to make a little comparison between, again, to illustrate the point about real sincere and theatrical, the illusion of sincerity. Because when I listen to the breakdown, just in terms of musical colour and sort of drama, it always reminds me a bit of the Another Lonely Christmas, which is essentially a comedy song, right? I mean, Another Lonely Christmas has got a punchline where, you know, it's a melodramatic comedy, yeah? It's not real, it's a complete fantasy. Yeah. This has some of those it's got that lushness to it, but it's like the real version of that song to me, right? And then the other thing, just to compare, I'm talking quite abstractly, and then the other thing that really makes it even more interesting for me is that even in what I consider to be a very, very honest and real song, there are a couple of possible games and illusions. And I don't know, but when he says, first one intoxicated, last one to leave.
Yeah,
you're like, is he playing a character there? Did Prince like to have a bit more wine than we know about? What's he talking about? Is he putting a red herring into a song because even though it's very emotional, he still has to play a character and say it's not all real, it's not all real. Is there still a bit of the wall there, even though he's trying to walk through a door? Or is he saying that he is intoxicated?
Unless he's talking about the painkillers.
Yeah, exactly. There's that as well. But you don't get into... Yeah. You do. I know. So it's very interesting because, you know, everybody knew speech marks that, you know, Prince didn't do drugs. Prince didn't drink. And he basically didn't. But when he talks about that, I think it might be the painkillers.
You know, I mean, it fits in with I have to take one of those to do a show. Uh-huh. I mean, if you were looking at it, I mean, we're really, really kind of like reaching for narrative for deconstructing there, and I'm not for a second saying that that's what it's about. But if you're throwing it out there, what could that be about? It's like, well, it could be that.
But I find it interesting that like it could be, you know, when he sings in All I Got Is 2 Cigarettes in 17 days. That's a character. That's how you write a song. You write a song. It's not about you, but you're painting a picture, right? You're saying, I'm in a room with a cigarette. It's a dramatic songwriting technique. When you say I worked in a five and dime, he never worked in a five and dime. He's painting, you know, he's a storyteller. But in this song, when he says he's intoxicated, is that storytelling or is that is that honesty again? So I find it very...
I've always taken it as honesty, just because he's talking in the lyrical content. It's always wanted the house with the biggest pool. It's talking about a time before he was huge, before he could just go out and buy the house with the biggest pool. So back then we know he did drink wine. I haven't seen stories of him getting absolutely out of his head drunk, but I think he's reflecting on a time where alcohol was a part of his life. Maybe
that's interesting.
As much.
I think he's still drunk. He's still drunk wine from what I've heard, and
maybe we're talking about intoxication from a very kind of substance point of view when he's talking about, say, fame or the adulation of a crowd. You can be intoxicated by those things. There's a high with some of those scenarios. You know, first one you know,
but he does. You know, the line that it's in does seem to be. You know, he's talking about going to, or throwing parties and getting intoxicated in a small time frame at a party. That and it feels like that's either just a bit of theatricality in an otherwise honest song, or some way that he did view himself, that he used to be a bit more indulgent, or I don't know.
See, if I was going to kind of put it into something that really fitted into his life, it would be like, you know, like it would be wearing everybody out with so many ideas and the high of creating new music and then wearing everybody out. First one intoxicated, last one to leave. You know, like I got high on producing all this music, and then nobody could keep up with the kind of the manic nature and for that period of time. You know, like I wore everyone out. So the drama of it is he makes you envisage a lonely room and, you know, kind of like the trash, like a trashy end of the night kind of scenario, like waking up in a trashy room kind of thing. But actually it could be any number of things when we're talking about intoxicated.
Okay. Well, that's great. I don't think there is one answer. And I think it's interesting that, like even in, it's just a testament to the richness of this song that there are different levels at which some of it might be being played at, although the overriding level, it seems to be such an emotionally sincere song for everyone here, I think.
Yeah. But the only negative about that song really is nothing to do with the actual composition, performance, or anything else. It's just that for some reason it's really heavily compressed and there's a mastering issue with it that makes it sound quite like there's kind of peaking and clips and gains, which is kind of like, but to be honest, it's one of those things. It's like a good performance I would rather listen to in a bad quality than a bad performance in good quality. So,
well, it's true. I think I also hear it on time. There's a few clips on time, and you have to just think, well, Prince certainly would have heard them. I guess maybe he just wanted to put a bit of grit back in things, but it's very odd. Yeah. It's very odd indeed.
Yeah.
Leah, I have a question for you. Obviously, there's a lot of Andy on that. Do you think that there should have been more tracks with Andy on the album, or?
I think it's an interesting concept. From a personal perspective, obviously my answer would be yes. But I think on this album, we have a real mix of female vocalists. Obviously, we've got Leanne in there as well. And I think that they were two vocalists that fitted beautifully together. And I think it gave it, it was like the difference. Andy was the personal voice and Leanne was the official doctor, whatever kind of concept.
MPG operator.
Yeah, I think those two parallels worked really well together, especially when you know that obviously Prince and Andy were in a relationship at the time. I think she was used to a perfect extent on the album. I think if it had been more, then we would have started looking at it the same way we did Third Eye Girl, where it was sort of a more duet / separate band entity. So I think it was used to a perfect amount, but I agree with Chopin about there needing to have really been a separate album that was just Prince and Andy, and I think it would have been a beautiful thing to release, not necessarily including the Week and Love stuff because that's a very different, their demo.
No, I think that was a thing of its own. I think this is what it feels like, which is another, I think it's the last track we haven't really mentioned on so far. That's another one of those things. If you think Rock and Roll Love Affair, this is what it feels like. Time, You Will Be With Me, like, and any number of others where her voice is present. If you put those on one album, it would be a very cohesive through album, like a kind of duet album. And I think that's the closest I've really ever come to making, rather than produce. I mean, we ended up with Superconductor, but I think it would have been kind of more interesting to have like a full-on duet album because they sounded so good together.
Yeah, and it's interesting because I've never felt the need with that with any other associated artist. I've never felt like, okay, we needed an album here that didn't happen. This just felt so organic and natural that it's kind of confusing why it didn't happen. Now, whether that was because of relationship breakdown or whatever, the personal side of things, that may have been why, I don't know. But it just felt like an organic, natural move that should have been made that for whatever reason didn't.
Or maybe that's what led up to this kind of period of comfortableness and revelation, and like it made its way onto. I mean, that's all completely speculative, but
it's also worth mentioning that Delilah or Paloma, whoever you want to call her, I think she's London-based. I think she was born in France, but she was on her backing vocals were on Way Back Home and Affirmation 3. And the rumours were that he was also singing her at some time as well. And I think she went to some of the London gigs, or she was meant to go to some of the London gigs. So yeah, it's worth mentioning that as well.
Oh, you guys are very knowledgeable about all this stuff. I'm just like, I don't know this stuff. So it's
this is a guy that spent 40 minutes trying to put all the binary code that was on the CD to see if I can get a secret message out. So I was like,
did you come up with anything?
No. I was like,
I'd love to see your workings from that day.
Yeah, I know. It's like, oh, here's my workings out. But when I saw the binary code on the CD, I was like, oh, there's a secret message on there. You know, it was very, Matrix, and there's elements of, I think, the Matrix in this as well. And I was like, oh, there's a whole theory about the Matrix, and 101 means 5, and it's the 5th version of the Matrix. I could go on and on.
Well, that's all we've got time for.
Yeah,
Thanks so much for.
But it was the binary stuff, and it was me. Yeah, so I know a lot about this album. And again, going back to that point of like, I was seeing a lot of messaging in there, and with the visuals and the songs and the lyrics. I was trying to put it all together. Yeah. Well, and that's the thing though with Prince. There's so many layers that you want to deconstruct. It's very much Inception.
I'm totally. I love that you did that. I mean, I'm doing it with the lyrics now, trying to deconstruct one line. This is what we do with people artists we love, and Prince was, a master at putting cryptic messages into things. I mean, the messages on the Black Album, the story and the Love Sexy.
The backward writing in the Symbol album.
Yeah, I mean, he did it throughout his career, so more power to you.
And even the reverse bit in the reverse bit in where it's like, oh, what happens if you play it the other way? It's all the secret messages, and you must know this idea about the theories of secret messages when you play the vinyl backwards and stuff. It's going back to that.
I've slowed down the cartoon telephone voice on Bob George to see what he's saying when he's talking to. Have you done that, anyone?
No, but it's that
that's a fun one.
But as an artist, you think there's more there, and you think you have more of a connection to the artist if you solve that Rubik's Cube. You think, oh, I'm as smart as him. I've got this. And especially with me being a geek and technical and
some mystery though. Don't you want to just leave a few things out there?
He doesn't want you to. Let's be real.
Hey, look, I mean, he may as well have invented the term Easter eggs in the modern sense for Prince records. He used to put them everywhere, didn't he? And he wants you to go chase. So I think that's brilliant. That if this one sent you round the Bensley, then job done, I reckon.
Yeah, and a lot of people will back me up that I had all these crazy theories when this album came out, and I was literally, that meme of the red string. Where he's linking it to everything. It was literally me with the album on the wall and just putting the red string and linking it to everything. It's that.
Well, one of the things
that was me.
Well, one of the
coming up to me going, "Leah, you all right? You okay? You okay?"
One of the other things that this album triggered, another kind of like conspiracy thing, was that just because from the line from if you want to find the answer to this cancer, it's like, oh, was he dealing with that?
Yeah,
but because everybody wants to find out everything. Now, I mean, the good thing is like being really into an artist and following and kind of finding out stuff can lead you to some very interesting things, but it also can lead you down some kind of rabbit holes too. I mean, like but Prince's entire career, I mean, think about just from the point of view of May You Live to See the Dawn at the end of every album until he changes his name to a Symbol to Welcome to the Dawn, just that in itself, there's
almost like there's a movie element to it. There's what's going to happen in the next episode.
And I think you can definitely go quite. I mean, I've met some fans that have gone way too far. Let's just say they were way too far. But but a genuine interest in curiosity in an artist will lead you, is always a good thing. But I think there's also the pitfalls of fandom as well.
Oh yeah,
as well, where things, like when an artist can take over your life or identity and stuff like that, it's quite a how to say it in the nicest way. But this isn't, especially like this period. Like I've kind of, this album sparks those kind of conversations. But it's a really interesting album just for that in itself.
If he was still alive, I don't think we would have had as much as these conversations. So it's
just timing.
It's out of context, and it's within hindsight as well. So I don't know if you want to sum it up.
It's better to just concentrate on the music as how it makes you feel necessarily than digging for something. Because that's the matter is, you're never going to really know. Some things, absolutely. This is the thing with me and Prince. I've never compared. I would imagine all of you, the four of you, are probably more into Prince as a person than I am. I find him an interesting person, and there is a person at a certain period of time I really would have perhaps liked to meet and talk to, and then a person at a certain period of time I wouldn't. But the thing for me is, it's just the music. It's just the music and how it makes me feel.
I'm more like you than you think in this one, Paddy. It's an artistic conversation I have with him. It's not a personal one, but it doesn't mean that one of the affecting things about artists is when they show themselves as well. So that's interesting to me in his artistic context. Yeah. But it's but no, I don't have any. Like I realized many years ago that I'd never wanted to meet Prince. Where I talk to him is here and here, Sorry, I'm pointing to my head and my ears. And heart,
yeah.
Oh, heart. I didn't point to my heart. Maybe no, I mean, that's the dialogue I have with him.
I'm where I find him the most interesting is in his process of creation and just the sheer volume and commitment to it. That is the kind of thing, if I think about it, of why I'm interested in him. It's just like, it's a fascinating how you can get that much.
This sounds massively trite, but he didn't do music. He was music. He wasn't an artist that released a lot of stuff. It was just him. It was a channel. And boom, there it was all the time, consistently.
I mean, he just blows my mind over and over again. And we've all been there where there's no other artist who you still hear new things, literally things you haven't heard in 900 listens. And then you go, oh my God, there's another bit of sonic information in there that I didn't hear before.
On a track you thought you was simple, not even on the overproduced tracks, on the very, very simple ones. It's maybe like the kind of the tuning of the reverb or something like that suddenly just hits you.
Exactly so. There's so much information coded into the art.
But that's exactly, I think, what you said, the way you said it there is, I think that's what strikes these kind of people to go down these kind of searching things. But at the end of the day, it's just a great artist to make great art. And that's the kind of, that's if you know that and you've kind of got that, then you've kind of got the answer to the puzzle in a way with Prince.
I'll tell you what else I've got, everyone.
What's that?
It's Computer Games on Vinyl by George Clinton. Booyah!
Yay! And on that bombshell.
Congratulations. Going through the tracks, what's your lasting impression of the album? I mean, we've talked quite deeply on this one, but what's your lasting impression of the album? Well, I'll start with Leah, actually.
Kind of going back to Lee's point about it almost feeling like his last album. For me, mentally, this was his last album. Again, no disrespect to Hit and Run Phase 1 and 2. This feels right for me. And I think every decade of Prince, we were given 2 albums that were era defining for him. So the 80s, we had Purple Rain, Sign of the Times, and the 90s, I'm sure that's more debatable because there is a broader range. But for me, this was one of the real era defining albums for Prince. And it made me really excited about what's to come. And that's why I use the word haunting a lot in relation to this album, because it haunts me that this is what we could have continued to have. I felt that he'd really found his feet for this new age of Prince, and he was taken away before he had a chance to fully explore that. But I think it's an absolute masterpiece of an album.
And with Lee?
I'm with Leah and Andy on this one. I'm with Leah that I think it's more his last album and it's more about legacy, and it was the album that set me on down the rabbit hole a lot. I think, a lot of the stuff on the album, a lot of the tracks were stuff that was very, very good that I hadn't heard from Prince in a while. And, you know, there's certain tracks on there. I was like, oh, wow, it feels like Prince again. And I really enjoyed it. And it's a very therapeutic album. And I think it's his last, best, greatest album.
Paddy?
Oh, God. I think it, as this, because of the sort of rhythms and currents of what we've been talking to and where it's sent us off at tangents, I think it's one of the, in retrospect, after he's gone, albums, it's a very sort of challenging listen to think about what it means and all those kind of things. In terms of the quality of it, I think there are some masterpiece bits on it, but I don't think as a whole piece, it's a masterpiece. I think it's definitely one of the stronger post-millennium albums. I'm not sure how I'd rate it against some of the others, but very, very, very strong. Probably as a whole, it's just as I've said, the middle bit for me, plenty of, and again, bits of new innovation. I mentioned it, and then Andy mentioned it. It's that juxtaposition of, yes, it does feel like there's a mortality theme. I don't buy that it's a preemption or anything like that. Yeah. I really do subscribe to the fact that Prince was an older guy. So the fact that he started looking gaunt and old in 2014, no disrespect to anybody what they think and seen him live, I just don't think that plays into it. This is about mortality and realizing where he is in life and things like that, to me. But again, juxtaposed against a load of absolutely wonderful new sounds, palettes, production styles, and particularly what sort of Leah said, it's like where he could have gone from here. Yeah, extra melancholy and extra sad, etc. But yeah, generally a very strong album.
Andy?
A mixture of what's gone above, emotionally devastating, but not because Prince died and nothing to do with preempting, and that's never coloured it for me. It's emotionally devastating because he put out some emotionally devastating material at this point in his life, and absolutely, as Paddy says, a whole new raft of ideas for the first time in a long time. And the biggest thing that gives me the chills is that he was finally finding a way to break through the wall of being, his metaphor obviously, of breaking through the wall of being, of not maturing gracefully. This is the one where he updated himself and started to find a new mature artistry. And I really, if we are going to talk about the fact that Prince has gone, I'll just say that this is the album that made me just go, there was more down here. There was more that I would have been excited about.
Chopin?
Yeah, it's a strange one because it is I can't deny it's an album that gained poignancy after the fact. At the time, it was a good album and with some really, really great songs that I really loved. But then even still, there's dips in energy, but there's enough great stuff to get over the okay stuff. There are albums of this period that I prefer to listen to from start to finish as albums, but I think weirdly the best work from this period does appear on this album. So it's if we're talking from an album point of view, there are better, more cohesive and more fun start to finish listens in this period. But his master stroke of this period in terms of creativity appears on this album. So it's a very confusing album in where I place it. I don't know where to place it in that sense.
Okay.
Go look at the binary, Chopin.
I wouldn't put it
Join
past him
with
to
me,
put a
the rabbit
message.
hole.
Come with us.
I bet if you put
So
all that,
Paddy's not coming. He's not allowed.
Exactly. I bet if you put that binary together, it just says Lee, go to bed.
All right. On that note, guys, we should probably go to bed.
Oh,
Not together.
okay. To everyone, thank you for coming and talking about this album, and everybody else, thank you for listening. It's been a lot more has been said about this album than I thought was going to be said about this album, so it's interesting.
Never doubt it, guys. Never doubt it. Even throwaway albums, I think sometimes. Oh, no, I'm not saying that. Sorry, Leah, I'm not saying that this is a throwaway album. I'm not.
Don't make me cancel you.
We this has been a right. I will rephrase that, and I said, every piece of Prince work requires this much discussion, and I think it does.
Agree.
And this stands up to that kind of analysis. So, everyone. We still talk to each other. It looks like Paddy and Lee have made up by the end of the podcast, so we'll be okay. Don't worry, we'll be back.
We'll be fine. I'm going into therapy.
We're still friends.
If you or anyone you are concerned about have suffered from any of the issues raised in this podcast, please get in contact at the following Twitter address.
Every Prince fan I know has been affected by the
exactly.
issues of disagreement in this podcast.